On July 26, 2024, the biggest video game strike in history took place. The 160,000 SAG-AFTRA union members were prevented from working on any video games from the publishers included in that strike. The reasoning behind this was the fact that AI was going to take over their jobs unless they got the studios to agree to new contract terms protecting their performers. What many weren't expecting though is that after 8 months, the strike would produce no results, and players started to feel the impact. But even though that was the case, the majority was still on their side, fully and unconditionally hoping that they get the rights that they deserve. This is why it was so incredibly shocking to see all the progress of this strike get absolutely squandered in the span of just 1 week because of a few entitled voice actors, specifically ones that worked on Genshin Impact. This got so bad that the once supportive community has now called for all of them to be replaced mid-strike, completely catching them by surprise. Even worse, this controversy opened up a can of worms and people started to look into the union itself, the one who organized this strike. This caused an incalculable amount of PR damage to the union as people started to find out its inconsistent, shady, and overall weird history so far, questioning why voice actors and performers in general don't have a better union to represent them. And if that wasn't bad enough, one of the entitled Genshin voice actors that caused this mess posted an 8-minute rant in front of a toilet complaining about all the harassment they've received while saying that they could vomit at any second. By the way, that voice actor voices the most important character in the entirety of Genshin Impact. Guys, this might be my most requested video of all time. Now, there are a few reasons for that, but it's mostly because while it is a crazy situation, it's also one of the most confusing. And seeing that this is definitely going to be an unforgettable part of the internet's history, I thought it would be necessary to talk about it. So, without further ado, let's do this. Alright, so to really understand what's been going on, we have to go back to the absolute fundamentals. What the hell is a labor union anyway? Well, the definition is an organization formed by workers in a particular trade, industry, or company to improve pay, benefits, and working conditions. In other words, when you negotiate your salary, you're negotiating your worth, and as one person versus an entire corporation, the corporation clearly has the advantage over you. There's only so much you can ask for before they say, well, we'll just hire the 1,000 other applicants that wanted this job. The whole point of a union is negotiating as one body of workers versus negotiating individually. That way you can give the company actual consequences for refusing to negotiate, like not working and making them lose a lot of money in the process. That's what striking is, and it's a union's biggest weapon. Unions have actually been around for a long time, ever since the Industrial Revolution, so the 19th century. Many of these new workers in factories were coming from farms and more traditional crafts, and were being treated pretty damn badly by the factory owners. They would decide to group together and negotiate as one. But for the US specifically, most unions fell apart due to bad management, and at the same time, their rights weren't recognized. Unions were not protected in any way legally. This would all drastically change in the year of 1935 when the Wagner Act would be passed under President Franklin Roosevelt. It guaranteed the right of private sector employees to organize into trade unions and engage in collective bargaining. In other words, it gave them the right to negotiate as one body rather than individual workers. And it also, more importantly, gave them the right to strike. From that year onwards, unions started to become way more popular. You wouldn't see them just popping up for trades like construction or plumbing. No, they would literally be everywhere, even in entertainment. You would have a labor union by the name of the Screen Actors Guild, otherwise known as SAG, representing actors in Hollywood, and you would have another union, the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, otherwise known as AFTRA. They would represent everyone else in entertainment, anything from a radio talk show host to a stuntman. We'll get back to SAG and AFTRA in a bit, but for now, just know that this was the golden age for unions. But just like any golden age, it had to come to an end eventually. This paper by John Addison highlights the pros and cons of unions in America. And while they do have a lot of pros, one can't help but notice that once a union gets powerful enough, it has the potential under bad leadership to become the exact same thing it seeks to fight against: a monopoly. As unions started to become more popular and numerous, they would start to have rivalries. At the same time, you'd also see a new invention pop up: a union shop, a workplace that would only hire you if you were a part of its union. This concept wasn't very popular because not everyone wanted to join a union. They had their reasons. some people didn't want to pay the agency fees associated with a union. These are fees typically taken monthly or yearly to keep the union running, while some others simply just wanted to retain their independence, being freelancers or contractors. But these union shops gave them no choice, and this must be very confusing to you if you're European. In France, for example, employees strike like every week at this point, but only 10% of employees are actually part of a union. That's because in France, if a union successfully gets more rights, like, 2 more days of parental leave a year, everyone, regardless if they're in a union or not, gets that benefit. So union shops were definitely counterintuitive. Additionally, what didn't help during the Golden Age was that some people realized that having a union full of thousands, maybe sometimes hundreds of thousands of employees under your command was very powerful. So you did have a couple of instances where crime syndicates would infiltrate unions to gain power and use that power to extort others. At some point, one of the biggest unions in the country, the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, with over 1.3 million members, had their president, Jimmy Hoffa, effectively use the $2.2 billion pension fund that was meant for employees' retirement as his personal bank account. He would use it to invest in property, to bribe certain officials, whether politicians or mafia bosses, and Forbes called it the most abused, misused pension fund in America back in 1980. Just like Uncle Ben told Peter Parker, with great power comes great responsibility. And some people chose to completely abuse that power, but the killing blow for unions, really the final nail in the coffin, actually came after giving them more rights. You see, the Wagner Act only gave private sector employees the ability to unionize. But on 1962, almost 30 years later, John Kennedy decided to make it possible for public sector employees to unionize as well. This meant that government employees were able to not only create unions, but join them too. There was one very important condition in this executive order though, and that was you are forbidden to strike as a public sector employee. 19 years later, that rule would be broken under the most anti-union president in United States history, Ronald Reagan. In 1981, a union of air traffic controllers by the name of Professional Air Traffic Controllers Organization organized a strike. 13,000 of its 17,500 members walked off the job. They all wanted a $10,000 a year pay raise, as well as a 4-day work week as opposed to a 5-day work week. And finally, a full retirement after 20 years of work. Air traffic controllers are technically public sector employees. Ronald Reagan gave them 4 days to get back to work or all be fired. Within 4 days, 1/4 of the striking employees came back. The rest were all fired, which led to the complete decimation of this union. After this incident, strike rates in the country would go down significantly and unions would slowly but surely die out a slow, painful death. As it stands today, private sector unions are at their lowest in the last 50 years. And in most industries, unions are struggling to even keep their current members, except for one industry in particular, and that's entertainment. This brings us back to both SAG and AFTRA, the two biggest unions for anything entertainment related. Seeing that they both practically own the entertainment world, they decided to merge in 2012 to really consolidate their position as the premier union for anything entertainment related. But that's not all. Ever since merging, they have been making bank, dude. From 2012, after merging, until 2022, they made over $1 billion in member dues and non-member fees. As if that wasn't enough, its membership climbed to record highs. As other unions struggled to even exist, SAG-AFTRA was killing it, with a record 171,000 active members paying their fees. I mean, look at these earnings. In 2022 alone, they made over $101 million in membership fees. How is that even possible? Well, it might have to do with the fact that in order to join them, you have to pay a $3,000 initiation fee. But that's only the beginning, because after joining, you have to pay over $236 a year, as well as 1.575% of any money you earn every year in order to stay in the union. Even by labor union standards, that's a lot. So what do they offer in return? Well, they offer healthcare as well as pension/retirement plans like most unions. Oh, they have deals and discounts as well as discount films. Okay, you know what? It's totally worth the price tag. But you want to know what's even better? After paying $3,000 to join, you only get health coverage if you meet applicable earnings thresholds. And you only get pension contributions when you're working SAG-AFTRA contracts only. Okay, that seems like the bare minimum. I don't know why this guy is staring at me the way he is. It's creeping me out. But hey, listen, the entire point of SAG-AFTRA is that they fight for you, right? That's what a union does. Collective bargaining. And that's what they claim to do. SAG-AFTRA is on your side when it comes to contracts, representatives, safety, diversity, you name it. So were they able to step up when actors and performers faced an existential threat? Maybe, but not for everyone. Picture yourself as a university student on November 2022. You have a dissertation to present next week and ChatGPT just came out. This was revolutionary for any student. And while it was really cool to have an AI be able to write so much with such little prompts, things went from cool to concerning when Sora came out, capable of creating videos just from prompts. Immediately, there was a big concern, not just over all the things they stole to make this, but over the fact that greedy studio executives would probably see this as an opportunity to cut even more costs from already terrible Hollywood movies. And in 2023, that's exactly what happened. A Marvel show by the name of Secret Invasion, meant for Disney Plus, used AI for its opening credits sequence. Only AI, nothing else, just AI. It looked terrible. And that got people panicking. This was barely 1 year after ChatGPT. It clearly looked bad, but it was approved anyway. What else are studios willing to do now? This is when SAG-AFTRA and its biggest members decided to step up and fight for the average common actor's rights. In the summer of 2023, a vote was held over whether to strike or not, and the majority, more than 93% of SAG-AFTRA members voted yes. So it was official, they were all ordered to strike, meaning that they couldn't work on any movies or series or even participate in any promotional material. And after 118 days of striking, they finally were able to reach a deal with the top studios in Hollywood for many different things, including compensation, residuals, and AI protections. There was only one small problem though. This enormous victory, as SAG-AFTRA called it, only applied for people working in cinema or theater, or just Hollywood in general, but had nothing to do with the profession that is most vulnerable to the rise of artificial intelligence: voice acting. When I said that SAG-AFTRA represents everyone in entertainment, I meant it. They represent everyone. They're practically a monopoly. This includes anyone doing voiceover. We're talking voice actors for games, for anime, for just about anything. But let's not forget that video games also have actors, singers, dancers, stunt actors, motion capture artists, and a bunch of different performers under SAG-AFTRA. So technically speaking, all of these people were left behind during that strike in 2023. This was a very big problem because these performers were paying the same fees and dues as Hollywood actors and were in an industry that is way more likely to use AI compared to Hollywood, as evidenced by recent developments. This has gotten so problematic that layoffs have been increasing while AI initiatives have been getting more and more funding. It's gotten so unbearable that game developers are getting so fed up with their boss's obsession with AI. Now, for a while, people didn't really take these warnings very seriously. I mean, who actually thinks that AI can replace real developers, right? Well, recently, we got a peek as to what the future could look like, and it's not looking good at all. On March 20th, 2025, Ark Survival Evolved released a trailer for an upcoming expansion. This is genuinely one of the worst things I've ever seen. Like, look at this. This is really bad. It obviously was disliked bombed. People hated it, but that's not really going to be enough of a reason for developers not to use AI. And while yes, this looks terrible and video generation still has a very long way to go before looking decent, voice-related AI tools are already worryingly very good. One quick Google search and you can find many different websites, sometimes free, able to fully clone a voice, and the only thing they need is just a short audio clip of that person talking. Some of them are so good that the AI voice doesn't sound monotone, like it won't be talking like this. It'll be able to scream, sometimes even able to whisper, and sometimes even exhibit some form of emotion, depending on how good the audio sample you give it is. Many voice actors have been feeling existential for years now. Is this it? Are they even needed anymore now that AI has gotten so good? So seeing that SAG-AFTRA so heroically stood up to the dangers of AI for its actors in cinema, it only made sense for them to do the same thing for its voice actors and motion capture artists when it came to video games, since they represented them too, right? Well, it took them a little while, but in the summer of 2024, they finally decided to go on strike for video game performers. The SAG-AFTRA president said, "We're not going to consent to a contract that allows companies to abuse AI to the detriment of our members. Enough is enough. When these companies get serious about offering an agreement our members can live and work with, we will be here ready to negotiate." This strike is happening because after 2 years of negotiation, they couldn't reach an agreement with 10 video game studios in particular. The whole point of this strike is to not work for these companies in particular, and that is it. This isn't an industry-wide strike. It only affects Activision, Blindlight, Disney Character Voices, Electronic Arts Productions, Epic Games, Formosa Interactive, Insomniac Games, Take-Two Productions, VoiceWorks Productions, and Warner Bros. Games. That's it. Under union rules, you cannot work for any of these companies, but no one is stopping you from working for any other company. SAG-AFTRA didn't really frame it that way though. They said, "We're fighting for our survival," and they made it seem like they were striking over the entire industry. This strike affects roughly 2,600 SAG-AFTRA members. And as I mentioned earlier, this wasn't just about voice actors, it was also about motion capture artists, stunt performers, singers, dancers, and it even prohibited people from participating in camera tests, rehearsals, auditions. It was a complete embargo on video game work for these developers. And you know what? It was really hard to find anyone opposing the strike online. It seemed like everyone was on these performers' sides. Yes, you deserve to be protected from AI. SAG-AFTRA claimed that the contract would also have better healthcare options and higher pay. Who would be opposed to that? People wanted to see them succeed. But we're in 2025 now, and after more than 200 days of striking, SAG-AFTRA says that they're nowhere near close in agreement with these affected studios, saying that the latest contracts proposed by them have alarming loopholes. SAG-AFTRA doubled down, saying that we have proposed a deal to these studios that includes wage increases of over 15% for SAG-AFTRA represented performers in video games, as well as enhanced health and safety protections and industry-leading terms of use for AI digital replicas in-game and additional compensation for the use of an actor's performance in other games. But here's the thing, if you're a gamer, there's a good chance that you had no idea that the strike was happening to begin with, so what gives? The whole point of this strike is to delay the games currently in development by the studios that are affected. So since Take-Two is involved, for example, GTA 6 is probably experiencing some delays with voice acting. But since it hasn't come out yet, you as a consumer haven't really felt the strike in any way. Unless, for whatever reason, you played Genshin Impact. You see, even though Genshin Impact's developer Hoyoverse is not part of the strike in any way and has always been a non-union project, it's never been a union project, a big part of their voice acting talent for their English dub happens to be SAG-AFTRA members, and those voice actors have decided to strike the game. Unlike the other games being striked, this one is a live service game that has updates come out periodically with voiced quests. This means that ever since the strike, many of the patches coming out have had completely mute characters when you play with the English dub, and the players have been feeling it. So that's where things get kind of weird. In their FAQ section, they have this question here. I'm a SAG-AFTRA member, but I'm tempted to take a non-union job to make ends meet, like Genshin Impact. Why is that a bad thing? I'm just trying to earn a living. To which they answer, non-union work undercuts the union's ability to negotiate the best contracts possible for you. If non-union producers can hire the best in the business for next to nothing, they have no incentive to go union. Additionally, non-union work allows producers to pay less and avoid paying residuals and retirement benefits. It also subjects you to longer unpaid work hours and potentially hazardous working conditions. And when you work off the card and run into problems, the union can't help you because the project wasn't produced under the SAG-AFTRA contract. Working off the card not only contributes to the growth of non-union work, but it puts your membership in jeopardy. Under the union's Global Rule 1, members must work under contract. Consequences for working off the card range from fines to suspension to expulsion from the union. No, yeah, not only are you confused, I am too. How is it that the majority of voice actors on Genshin Impact, a non-union project, are SAG-AFTRA affiliated, which directly breaks this rule, but are also striking even though the game isn't part of the strike? It makes absolutely no sense. You know what else doesn't make sense? Around 6 months before the video game strike, SAG-AFTRA signed a deal with a voiceover studio for AI use in video games. This article from Variety says, the company sells AI voices to video game developers from its library of ethically licensed voices. Last year, the company announced a new iteration of smart NPCs, non-playable characters that could use OpenAI or other language models to interact with video game players. This deal pertains only to digital replicas, using AI to recreate the voice of a real performer, living or dead. This obviously divided the hell out of voice actors in SAG-AFTRA. It's like, what? Like, you just did a strike for actors for like over 100 days, and now you're signing this and you haven't even covered video game actors yet? Weird. I think disappointment is the first word that comes to mind with both announcements. Amber Warnock Estrada, a video game journalist and aspiring voice actor, said, "We were all just like, what was the point of the strikes?" Marcus Rothenberg, a full-time voice actor, echoed the same disappointment. "The union didn't consult their members," Rothenberg said. "I know people that had never heard anything about this until the deal went through." You know what else is interesting? For Genshin Impact specifically, Hoyoverse uses a studio established in the US by the name of SIDE. That means that they don't hire voice actors directly, they hire a studio that gets them actors on their behalf. SIDE also happens to have very strict AI protections in their contract. So what are the voice actors striking exactly against Genshin? No one really knew, and no one really bothered to research. Look, this is the Genshin Impact subreddit, in which someone posted an update on the strikes. Look at the top comment. Nice. Hopefully the negotiations are swift and in actors' favor. Even though the game they were playing was practically voiceless, right? They saw the voice actors voicing some of their favorite characters go on strike for their rights against AI, and they supported them fully. If there was any frustration from the players, it was actually towards Hoyoverse. Why the hell don't they sign the contract? Why is it so hard for them to give voice actors the rights that they deserve and protection against AI? This was the attitude that most of the community was exhibiting, and everyone was mostly hoping for a peaceful resolution until people started getting fired. Zenless Zone Zero is a game made by the same developer of Genshin Impact. One of the characters in this game is Von Lycaon. He's really fun to play and was definitely made to appeal to the very rich furries. Ever since release, his voice actor was Nicholas Thurkettle, and the community loved him. However, in early 2025, his dialogue in new patches would end up being unvoiced. You see, the strikes against Genshin Impact weren't the only ones. Every Hoyoverse game was affected, including Zenless Zone Zero. So people assumed Nicholas was just participating in the strikes like everyone else. But on March 12th, 2025, he tweeted this out, saying, "Proxies," which is the name of the player in Zenless Zone Zero, "I'm learning about this as you are, and I share your shock. Neither Hoyoverse nor Sound Cadence," which is the studio that Hoyoverse hired specifically for Zenless Zone Zero, "has communicated with me since October. I've been fully available and recorded multiple voice jobs in that time. I'm trying to learn more and absorb this news." On March 12th, 2025, Nicholas, as well as the community, found out that he was recasted. Another voice actor had effectively replaced him as Von Lycaon, shocking the entire community. A bit over an hour later, another voice actress by the name of Emery Chase had this to say, "Hey Proxies, I was replaced as Soldier 11, another character in Zenless Zone Zero, because I am unwilling to perform work not covered by a SAG interim agreement during a strike for AI protections, the outcome of which will determine the future of our industry. Any other theories that pop up are incorrect." I'd like to clarify that there's a difference between being struck and not being on an interim agreement. Union projects that began work prior to the strike and non-union projects are not struck, but they also do not offer the union-enforced AI rights we are fighting for. Many actors are choosing to voluntarily withhold work on these categories of projects because we feel it is the best way to support the union's fight for the protections that are critical to our continued ability to create the art we love. I knew that by withholding work, it was possible I'd be replaced, though of course I hoped they would choose to leave her silent until I was able to return. I found out the role was recast today alongside all of you. I loved working on Zenless Zone Zero and would have been thrilled to return to the project post-strike or with an interim agreement, but I stand by my choices regardless of the outcome. All my best wishes to the cast and the production team. Thank you for a great ride, Proxies. So there you have it. Even though Hoyoverse is not part of the official SAG-AFTRA strike, Emery, as well as many other actors who are SAG-AFTRA and working for Hoyoverse, decided to strike independently from their union in solidarity with the actual strike. This was all in an effort to make Hoyoverse sign the agreement, even though they technically weren't part of the actual strike. Nicholas Thurkettle quote tweeted Emery's tweet and said, "This is what I've been quiet about. I'm not SAG, but what game companies want to do with AI is an existential threat. I took a personal stand to ask for protection and had to be willing to give up the best thing that's ever happened in my professional life. I stand by my choice." But this kind of didn't really make sense in regards to his first tweet. Someone replied with, "So you were aware that they did reach out to you regarding returning to the role and you turned it down knowing you could potentially be recasted for this choice, and then went off to Twitter to say they never reached out to you since October?" Things weren't really making much sense, but at the same time, people were still on the voice actor's side. I mean, they were claiming that they were fighting for their own existence, that if they don't do this, AI will replace them fully. So they were excused for the sake of the bigger picture. These tweets made the actual studio, Sound Cadence, have to make some sort of a statement because a lot of theories were running rampant. This is what they had to say. From top to bottom, Sound Cadence Studios is a community of artists. As concerns have been raised regarding how we work with our voice actors, we wanted to take this opportunity to clarify where we stand and how we operate. Every contract at our studio features explicit AI protections regardless of union status. Much of our staff are actors themselves and could not in good conscience offer other performers work we would not be willing to take. The decision to recast talent on any project is not made lightly. While sometimes our hands are tied as to what we can communicate and when, we understand how personally actors take their roles and always want to ensure that no one is ever blindsided. Our studio has and will continue to honor legacy casting on all projects we've inherited whenever possible, and always reach out to actors to reprise their roles before investigating any other options. We respect the decisions of all actors in navigating the ongoing strike and fully support SAG-AFTRA and its AI negotiations. The passion of fan communities for video game characters and the people who bring them to life is further evidence that real human actors matter, and we will continue to bring voices to our clients' projects in the most human way possible. Look, things became even more confusing with this statement because they said, "We'll always reach out to actors to reprise their roles before investigating any other options." But Nicholas claimed that he wasn't contacted for over 4 months. Additionally, Emery claims that she was doing this for AI protections, but they're already present in the Sound Cadence contract. She then specified that she only wants to work on a project that has an interim agreement, so a SAG-AFTRA contract. But she was working on this game before the strike, which meant that she was a union member working a non-union project, which is against SAG-AFTRA's policies. Does a single thing here make sense? No. But again, it didn't matter. People were still siding with the voice actors because this was the voice actor fighting against evil corporations and AI. They were always given the benefit of the doubt. Until one day, all of the goodwill they had from all the community would come crashing down on their faces. Kinich is a Genshin Impact character available in its newest region. At some point, much like many other characters in Genshin Impact, his English dub would go silent, and people had correctly assumed that much like all the other actors, his actor was also on a SAG-AFTRA strike. But then, that voice actor, John Patnode, posted this statement on March 26, 2025, saying, "Hey everyone, if you've been playing the latest 5.5 update in Genshin Impact and are hearing Kinich speak for the first time in 6 months, it's not my voice, I've been recast. I've been withholding voiceover services during the SAG-AFTRA interactive strike because Hoyoverse wouldn't offer AI protections in the form of a SAG interim agreement. They'd kept my character's dialogue silent for months, all the while I had made the difficult decision to continue not going in until an interim agreement was signed, and this was ultimately why I was recast. Now obviously, a recast is not what I wanted. I'd hoped that any progress behind the scenes would be made and I would come back safely, or that if recast auditions went out, my colleagues wouldn't read for them. Unfortunately, I was wrong. I absolutely adored playing Kinich. Genshin was my comfort game during the early parts of the pandemic, and it was a dream of mine to book a playable character. At the time, I didn't have an agent, didn't live in LA, or had any connections that would get me close, but 4 years later, I did it, and the messages I've received from you all saying how much my performance as Kinich meant to you made my heart swell. I would and can return if Hoyo invites me back and signs an interim. I stand by my choices regardless of the outcome. Also, the strike is still ongoing. Please don't believe this information on the internet. My best wishes to the cast and the production team. Thank you for everything, JP." This came as an absolute shock to the entire community, because here there wasn't some weird conflicting story. This was John saying, hey guys, I'm striking and I was directly recast because of that strike. Genshin is also a bigger game than Zenless Zone Zero, so of course the stakes were higher. I also want to point out that getting an English dub role in Genshin Impact is actually a huge deal. Due to the massive popularity that this game gained during the pandemic, they were one of the main beneficiaries of its popularity. This allowed them to grow their social media followings substantially, allowing them to land more roles. It was a major stepping stone in the industry. So getting a role here, as well as losing it, is a very big deal. But typically, when someone gets recasted in a controversial way, like with what happened with Emery, the replacement keeps it secret, at least for a while. This time though, it wasn't silent at all, and it created total chaos. On the same day, the voice actor Jacob Takanashi would post this on Twitter, saying, "Role announcement. I'm honored to join the English cast of Genshin Impact as the voice of Kinich. Taking up the mantle of Malipo is a privilege, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to carry the flame from the previous flame bearer, John, who did an incredible job. Those are big shoes to fill, and I promise to give it my all out of respect for him, for Hoyoverse, and for you, the fans. Thank you to Diana for their amazing direction and for helping me navigate the intricacies of this incredible game, and to Side Tokyo and Hoyoverse for the honor of bringing Kinich to life. I'm deeply grateful for the privilege of entertaining you all." Now yeah, you're probably expecting the Genshin community to be divided on this, with some people completely shitting on Jacob and others supporting him. What no one was expecting though is that the voice actors themselves would join in on the shit show and publicly attack Jacob for taking on this role. There was only one voice actor with something positive to say. That was Nathan Noakes, saying, "Welcome to the team, Jacob." Every other voice actor in these replies had something negative to say about this. Here are some comments from many voice actors, not just for Genshin Impact. Like, "There are many reasons why roles get recast. I personally draw the line with the original actors holding out because they are fighting for better work conditions. I have refused many auditions to take over roles from my peers because I'd never do that to another fellow actor." This was Jacob being publicly called out by a very well-renowned English dub voice actress, but she was far from being the only one. Kaylee Mills, the voice actress behind Keqing in Genshin Impact, someone who greatly benefited from the explosion in popularity the game went through during the pandemic, had this to say: "This is actually kinda diabolical. If you need the money, at least take the role uncredited. This just comes off as an easy grab for clout. It's not a good look." This is another Genshin voice actor replying with 3 thumbs down, and then you had the voice actor behind one of the most recognizable characters in the entirety of Genshin Impact, Paimon, who's literally the mascot of the game, say, "This wasn't a passing of the torch." And even going as far to say that there is a huge difference when you take the role of an actor who is striking for AI protections. "You are no castmate of mine." Now, these voice actors making these aggressive public statements probably thought that they were on top of the world, convinced that not only are they on the right side of history, but because they're on the right side of history, everything they say will be taken positively by the community. And you know what? Maybe in another world, it would have been the case. It just so happens, though, that they're using a platform that has something called community notes, and that's exactly what happened to Corinna, inadvertently triggering one of the biggest reputational catastrophes you could ever imagine. Here's what the community note said. "It should be noted that despite bullying another voice actor while using SAG-AFTRA as an excuse, Corinna themselves isn't on strike, even though they're American-based and the voice actor they're harassing isn't." Whoa, that's a lot to take in. People started taking a step back and thinking, wait, that's actually true. The strike has been ongoing for 8 months, and yet every single patch that comes out, Paimon is probably the only character that's still voiced. Corinna was starting to deal with an ever-growing backlash, but that didn't discourage other voice actors from tweeting passive-aggressive tweets towards Jacob. This would contribute to negatively impacting public perception even further. Here are some examples. This voice actor said, "I normally try to be pretty professional on here, but if you don't like me speaking out against actors scabbing and taking striking actors' roles, kindly fuck off. I'm not going to be silenced just because you don't care about us getting ripped off and abused by these companies." A scab is a union term that Jacob was called multiple times by other voice actors. It means someone who doesn't strike and continues to work. The voice actress of Sucrose from Genshin, as well as Venture from Overwatch, had this to say: "It's insane how entitled the gacha fanbase is, holy shit, keeping the characters hostage from us and hurting our experience. What? We're fighting for workers' rights. That's what a strike is all about. If this was the 1940s and we were striking, it would be based or some shit. I have no interest in arguing with people who'd rather see integrity replaced by scabs or AI. That's not what video games are all about. It's an art form comprised of so many beautiful artists doing their best, not about the money or fame or AI. I'm grateful that the projects I'm still working on offer humane protections and livable wages, and fan bases that aren't insane and appreciate real integral voices. Also, I know this isn't all gacha fans, but the replies to some of my fellows are horrendous. Some people pointed out that Jacob wasn't even in the US, he was based in Japan, saying, "You guys outright attacked a voice actor for being a scab when he's Japan-based, and the strike and union don't even exist there. If you didn't know, SAG-AFTRA is American. If you're based outside the US, you can't join SAG-AFTRA." Here's what Valeria had to say: "What's disgusting is y'all writing this hard for a scab. He's an English voice actor. He can still scab even if he's based in a different country. I don't know if anyone told you, but audio transcends borders. He knowingly took work from someone else." The voice actress for Hu Tao from Genshin Impact, as well as some other big roles in anime, quote-tweeted John's statement and said, "Thank you for standing strong and holding the line with us. You're a real one," and then replied with, "Clears throat, some of us shaking my f***ing head," referring to Jacob. This voice actor tweeted, "Say, are you Japanese or Japanese American, able to portray a 20s male character, can sing, have an excellent home studio? I've got a couple of colleagues in mind, but I would like to know more voice actors, except that one guy. Please DM me your website. Thank you." Of course, he was referring to Jacob. The voice actor for either the male main character of Genshin Impact had this to say: "Wow, on the day this happened." Now here's where the crisis really deepens for all these voice actors that made these public statements. Nathan Noakes, the only voice actor that was nice to Jacob when he announced his new role, said, "Right, I spoke to the new voice actor who lives and works in Japan, and he didn't even know what was going on. He came into an onslaught of criticism and didn't know anything about the strike or SAG, since SAG isn't in Japan. Blows my mind." At that point, it was very hard to side with these voice actors that were dogpiling Jacob. The guy had no idea, and instead of reaching out to him, private messaging him, talking to him one-on-one personally, they chose to make a vicious example of him in public. As this was all going on, Corinna was too busy fighting a battle all alone, trying to prove to everyone that even though voicing a character like Paimon during a strike is scabbing, it's justified, but not for Jacob, only for Corinna. This was Corinna's response to a fan pointing out the hypocrisy. "No, you're right. I'm technically scabbing. I originally have this role, and technically I can still work this role. I am a disabled person, and this is the job that puts food on my table as I actually record this role year-round. But I didn't take this role from another person who is striking. I had this role, and I am stuck in it because I have no other way to pay for my medical bills. But yes, technically I am a scab, and you're right. I don't deserve any praise right now. I don't deserve any of it. I deserve to be told off just like this actor, so please do." "No one should look up to me. I'm trapped and a coward because I continue this job, because if not, I end up homeless. I don't say that because I deserve sympathy. I don't. The ones sticking to the picket line deserve all of the praise, not me. I love voicing Paimon. Love it. I have been through so much that you guys will never truly understand, but I also know what I am, and I should not be given any applause for this. If I could feasibly stick the line with my fellow actors, I would. This job actually barely keeps me alive. But that doesn't mean that it makes it different. It is not a good thing to my fellow actor that I continue to work on this game. I have struggled with that since the strike started, so call me out for this. Please, I deserve it. If it means we get closer to making things better, then so be it." So Corinna was arguing that the reason why Paimon is still voiced in Genshin during a strike is that so they don't end up homeless? Isn't that why everyone works a job to begin with? I mean, isn't that... I'm sorry, like, how does you being disabled have anything to do with this? Someone pointed out, so what? Many disabled people work remotely in other professions. Voice acting is not your only option if it puts you in such an unethical position. But you have to seek attention on twitter.com like a 16-year-old and present yourself like a saint of the whole community. To which Corinna replies with, "I definitely don't present myself as a saint, but you don't know my disability and what I am able to do." This person said, "I'm very convinced that you keep voicing Paimon because while people are unhappy that characters they love are unvoiced, like 90% of the player base would actually fucking cheer if Paimon was fucking silent." That's so true. Look, if you haven't played Genshin, you have to understand. Paimon works as the mouthpiece of the main character. If she's not voiced, the game would actually be hurt beyond recognition. And to recast Karina would be a nightmare because there are hundreds of thousands of lines to re-record from the beginning of the game until now. If anyone is gonna convince Hoyoverse to sign this agreement, it would be Karina striking. But there you are, the most important role is still being voiced during a strike. How can you take any of this seriously? This is like when players tried to boycott Genshin by continuing to play the game every single day. Like, come on, dude. To be fair, Karina did receive backup from Keqing's voice actor, Kaylee Mills. Unfortunately, though, this only ended up making them look worse because Kaylee was literally pocket-watching Jacob's finances, saying this is one small job for him, not his full-time work. It's Karina's bread and butter. He's done very little voiceover work, so it isn't what he's relying on to pay the bills. For all we know, his wife's the breadwinner. Either way, they bought a house recently, so I doubt it was a necessary job for survival. I think it's safe to say that I'm not the only one who gets a bad taste in their mouth when they read something like this, right? Not to mention that Kaylee very conveniently didn't mention that Jacob has children. He has a family to take care of. So how is it any different from her friend Karina, who'd be homeless if it wasn't for Paimon's voice acting work? The fact that he bought a house? There's something called a mortgage. And regardless, delving into someone's personal finances like this is unprofessional in any industry, period. They were trying their hardest to paint Jacob as this supervillain. Some fans joined in on this too, failing miserably. Here's someone siding with the voice actors trying to paint Jacob as a liar that knew about the strikes even though he said that he didn't. Showing a tweet he had made in 2023 saying that if companies used AI for a commercial, then he's just going to assume that the product is subpar. That's because he believes that if they can't afford to pay for real authentic voice actors, then they also can't pay for quality assurance, research and development, and supply chains. This was community noted, and the message is SAG-AFTRA video game strike didn't start until July of 2024, so unless he can time travel, it's impossible for him to have been talking about the SAG-AFTRA strike way before it even happened. Also, generally being against AI usage is not conducive to being proof of being aware that SAG-AFTRA is on strike. As time went on, Jacob was being loved more and more by the community, while the other voice actors that stood against him were being gradually hated. And that's when they would try to play the victims. The voice actors for Hu Tao from Genshin tweeted this out a couple days later, saying the harassment and bullying over the past day plus has been really unwarranted to say the least. Some of y'all need a lot of help, and now this pure evil. So Brianna unfortunately tragically lost her little sister at some point in time, and this is someone emailing her with the username Brianna Dead Little Sister, saying that they hope that she rots in hell. Bear in mind, there's worse things in this email that I cannot show at all because of YouTube, but you get the point. This is very, very inappropriate. The voice actor June, who had made a tweet purposefully blacklisting Jacob from a role, said, "Genuinely, sincerely, I hope you find help. I really mean it. Troll behavior on Twitter is one thing, but sending direct emails is something else. It often points to a pain that's deeper inside the person. Whatever that may be, Kira, I hope you find help that heals that pain." And it's an email that says that he should end it all, but with more direct language. Also specifying that all other voice actors who also criticized Jacob should do the same thing. Karina received the same exact email and said, "Guys, don't worry, my white blood cells are already trying to do that. It's just a matter of time. Be patient. #autoimmune." Another voice actor would receive the same exact message, again from Kira. I don't know who Kira is, bro, but hey, you gotta chill. The post said, "Love the community. Someone named Koro Kira thought this was the appropriate thing to send me this afternoon." This prompted Jacob to quote tweet this tweet saying, "Hey, I know tensions are high, but don't do this, Jesus. If you send death threats to anyone on my behalf, too far, man. Too far. Sorry you had this happen to you, Kiba." And now I'm seeing it wasn't just Kiba. Come on, guys, way too far. Suicide and threats? No, just no, knock it off. Someone replied to Jacob's post saying, "With respect, tensions would decrease significantly if you recognized and spoke publicly on the fact that voice actors aren't bullying you. If you truly didn't know about the strike, say so. If you did, say so. But voice actors are going to keep getting attacked until then." I shouldn't tell you that this was extremely controversial to say since it has 681 replies, but at this point, it was very safe to say people were tired of any voice actor that had something bad to say about Jacob. Kiba, the same person that had received that email, had posted a reply on the initial Kinich post. Someone had said, "Can we collectively please stop harassing this man? The amount of unprofessionalism from voice actors under this post is just chilling. Why choose to bully someone you don't even know when you can let John and Jacob work this out on their own? Twitter warrior culture is disgusting." Kiba then said, "Please stop using the words bullying and harassment so freely. It is very obvious you don't fully understand why we are upset. It's called scabbing. End of story. It is bad regardless. If this were a different situation outside of a strike, which does affect everyone, it'd be different." A couple days later, Kiba would tweet this: "Getting followed just so people can shit on me is an encapsulation of how it feels to be a person of color and queer in this industry, to be honest. It's quite fascinating." Yeah, you know what? You're absolutely right. This is purely happening because of your skin color and your orientation. 100%. Obviously. Things were looking really bad, okay? The community that had supported these voice actors on their strike for months was now turning against them very violently and very quickly. This was the time to take a step back and reevaluate how to approach things, because clearly everyone was being harassed in some shape or form. But then SAG-AFTRA decides to step in personally and make things 1,000 times worse, opening up a can of worms in regards to the entire strike and their role as a union. On March 26th, a voice actor by the name of Aneris on Twitter had this to say: "Hey, Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail, and Zenless Zone Zero. We English voice actors would love to get back to work. I know the fans miss hearing their favorite characters and we miss voicing them. Please negotiate with SAG-AFTRA and sign the interim agreement to have us come back." What no one was expecting, though, is that SAG-AFTRA would quote tweet this and say what Aneris said: "Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail, Zenless Zone Zero," tagging all three of the biggest Hoyoverse games, right? And then saying, "We'll make it easy for you. Here's a link to our interactive/video game media agreements. Let's talk soon. Wink face emoji." Now look, this was a big deal, alright? SAG-AFTRA is negotiating with many studios behind closed doors, but this was the first time they publicly called out someone like this. It almost seemed like they were trying to use public pressure to make Hoyoverse resume talks with them. Now, I'm sure whoever tweeted this out thought that they were a genius in the moment, but guys, whoever's running this account has probably been fired, because this tweet alone has probably caused incalculable PR damage to SAG-AFTRA and this entire strike. Because on the next day, they got community noted. And it was extremely significant. Here's what it said: "This agreement has severe limitations on how Hoyoverse can work with non-union voice actors, including a lifetime time limit for the voice actor, and eventually forcing the voice actor to either join the union, which has large entry costs and fees, or stop working on the project," linking SAG-AFTRA's own website twice as the source for these claims. The first link is what we already looked at, showing how much it costs to join, $3,000, and a bunch of other fees to stay in. The second link actually included the SAG-AFTRA Independent Interactive Localization Agreement. This is what SAG-AFTRA was presenting to studios in order for them to sign it. It's 65 pages long, but what people were focusing on was Section 6 under Article 1 titled Union Security. It said, "Employer will only employ performers covered by this agreement who are members of SAG-AFTRA in good standing, or those who shall make application for membership on the 30th day following the beginning of employment, and thereafter maintain such membership in good standing as a condition of employment. Nothing in this agreement will be construed as preventing employer from hiring non-SAG-AFTRA members in accordance with the Taft-Hartley Act to perform in interactive programs." We'll get back to what this means later. But for now, they continue, "Employer shall pay to SAG-AFTRA as liquidated damages the sum of $500 for each breach by the employer of the provisions of this section. Any breach of this section is subject to arbitration. Each time the employer hires a performer in violation of this section, it shall be considered a separate breach irrespective of the number of days of employment. It is the employer's responsibility to ascertain if each performer is a member of SAG-AFTRA in good standing. Employers shall provide SAG-AFTRA the names of performers to be used in the production of interactive material no later than the time of hiring or 48 hours in advance of the initial sessions, whichever is later." SAG-AFTRA, making this tweet, thinking that they were going to publicly pressure Hoyoverse to talk with them, ended up backfiring because now people were reading the agreement in depth when they didn't even bother to do so before. As I already mentioned, they were in full support of voice actors and the strike because they thought it was purely just about AI rights. And after seeing this, they started not just questioning the strike and the voice actors themselves with their behavior, but SAG-AFTRA as a union. At the same time, the Chinese community of Genshin Impact caught wind of this and they were just as confused as everyone else. else, with one user explaining in detail that Hoyoverse, as a Chinese company, was already under strict anti-AI rules in China. Article 1023 of the Civil Code explicitly protects voice rights by referencing the protections for portrait rights. Unauthorized use of a person's voice, including highly similar AI-generated voices, constitutes infringement. If an AI-synthesized voice has identifiable characteristics like tone, intonation, or speech patterns that can be linked to a specific individual, it may still be deemed a violation of personality rights even if the original recording was not directly used. This law even covers using voices in different languages. This same Chinese user argued that if Hoyoverse were to sign the SAG-AFTRA agreement, they would face trouble in China because you can't join different unions as a Chinese company. You're already part of the All-China Federation of Trade Unions. This left people with more questions than answers. But at the same time, some others pointed out that, well, this is not true because Marvel Rivals actually signed the interim agreement, even though it was a game developed by NetEase, which is a massive Chinese corporation. In this case, though, it turned out to be unique, because NetEase weren't the only ones in this. They were obviously collaborating with Marvel, a massive American company. And since Marvel already employs a huge amount of SAG-AFTRA voice actors and performers, it only made sense that they would sign it, but not as NetEase, the Chinese entity. It was Marvel, the American entity, that signed it on behalf of NetEase, who developed the game for them. So SAG-AFTRA and the voice actors were making this out to be like, oh yeah, you can just sign it. Just sign the agreement, bro. It's very simple, but it's actually way more complex than they made it out to be. As confusion was running absolutely rampant, Koi Dao, the voice of Albedo in Genshin Impact, decided to use the huge following he garnered during Genshin's explosion during the pandemic to clear confusion about the strike. Around the time Von Lycaon and Soldier 11's voice actors were let go from South Cadence, he made a little thread clearing some things up, saying, if you're just learning about the video game strike, I want to clarify a key detail I've seen get distorted a lot. Generally, the developer decides whether to sign an interim agreement, not the recording studio. Often, the studio is only a middleman, they do not set this term. A recording studio may offer AI protections in its own contract with the actor, but this ultimately means very little because the developer owns the final recordings, not the recording studio. They cannot dictate how the developer uses that audio. If the developer does violate the AI protection clauses in that contract, then the burden of enforcement would be on the actor. Often, that means one guy having to lawyer up against a multi-million/billion-dollar company. This is what we mean by enforceable AI protections, because while we are deeply grateful for any recording studio's personal support in the strike, the fact remains they do not have the power or resources to protect us or meaningfully enforce any AI clauses in their contracts. Currently, only a SAG interim agreement can effectively do that, as it would be backed by the union's legal resources and can meet any violation by a big company on the appropriate scale. That's why actors are holding the line and why outrage at a recording studio ain't it. So this did clarify a couple of things, why the interim agreement is so important, because it means that the union will back you up legally if problems arise. But on March 12th, when this post was made, people were already on the side of voice actors. When things started shifting though, he made another post after SAG-AFTRA's disaster of a quote tweet, saying, taps the sign with incomprehensible force. Any video game can bring back their full voice cast immediately during the strike once they agree to enforceable AI protections via a SAG interim agreement, and the game can still keep its non-union actors after doing so. This is not a union actor versus non-union actor conflict. The goal of the strike is to ensure that this craft isn't lost to AI. We've got a common goal, which is why so many non-union actors are holding the line alongside their union castmates, despite having no obligation to do so. Non-union actors are among those getting recast across the industry right now because they were holding out for enforceable AI protections. They understood that without these protections, the job disappears for all voice actors, and I desperately don't want their sacrifices to be in vain. But again, this post's problem is that it doesn't answer the main questions. Why is it that the union security clause sounds so weird in the contract? Why does it seem like this is targeting non-union voice actors, forcing them to join after 30 days? Some people were starting to have doubts that this was very simple. Like this person saying, I'm just a dude on the internet and it's not that I don't believe you, it's that I've been around on the internet to know nothing is that simple. There's always some bullshit you or whoever can't get into otherwise. Why isn't it being done already? Koi replies with, hey, fortunately, with regards to this specific matter, it is that simple. Agree to enforceable AI protections and the voice actors can return. Over 150 games so far have signed on to the interim and were able to bring back their casts. It's happening right in front of our eyes. But we saw it with our own eyes, right? How there's 65 pages to this contract, and there's only 12 mentions of artificial intelligence. 12! On 65 pages. What are the other pages for? And why does it seem like non-union actors get screwed over with this deal? Someone asked, where's your source that they can still keep non-union actors? Every other agreement made suggests otherwise. Coy replies with, the Taft-Hartley Act of 1947 by law prohibits all labor unions, including SAG-AFTRA, from unilaterally barring non-union workers from union jobs. If a production wants to keep/hire a non-union actor, all they have to do is fill out a one-page form for that actor. Well, wait a second. I mean, if all you had to do was just fill up one page and keep working as a non-union actor, then I guess signing this contract is as simple as Coy is saying, right? Unfortunately, though, people were right to doubt this. Nothing is ever that simple. And for you to understand that, you need to understand what the hell a Taft-Hartley Act even is. Look, after the Wagner Act in 1935, unions were not only allowed to exist legally, but they also gained a ridiculous amount of influence. After World War II, they organized countrywide strikes that severely hurt the economy. In 1945 alone, almost 400,000 workers from different industries striked, and in 1946, over 1 million from different industries striked as well. Not to mention that things like union shops were becoming too prevalent. The government was slowly becoming more and more anti-union, and in 1947, they revised the Wagner Act with the Taft-Hartley Act. This made it illegal to have a union shop of any kind and prohibited certain types of strikes, like wildcat strikes, which is when unionized workers strike without the approval of their management. One of the most important aspects of this act was to give workers back some of the power that the unions had taken away from them. They could, for example, leave a union immediately without consequences. Before this act, they would have to give a 30-day notice, and if a strike was ongoing, they weren't allowed to work. But more importantly, this act allowed states to enact right-to-work laws. This gave workers the freedom to choose whether or not to join a union in their workplaces. Complete freedom. But you might be wondering, why is this necessary if union shops were made illegal? Well, it gets a bit complicated. There are currently only 26 out of the 50 American states that have right-to-work laws. This means that I can join any industry without ever, and I mean ever, having to join any kind of union, period. But if a state has no right-to-work law, then they must follow the Taft-Hartley Act, which states that if you were to join an industry that has a union contract, you have to join that union after 30 days. Again, if you're European, you must be very confused right now. I am too. But as you can very clearly see on this map, California is not a right-to-work state. And according to SAG-AFTRA's own website, this is what the process looks like if you want to hire a non-union actor. First, you have to submit compliance documentation. The Taft-Hartley form is required by producers who intend to hire non-union actors under specific conditions. The form must explain why a non-union member should be hired over union talent. This can include actors having special skills, they are famous, have certain physical appearances, among other qualifications. The union will review each Taft-Hartley form and decide whether the non-union actor meets the criteria to be eligible. 2. 30-day window. Once the non-union actor is approved to be hired under the Taft-Hartley form, they have 30 days to work on the union project without being required to join SAG-AFTRA. And then 3 talks about union eligibility. But one thing's for certain, when I'm reading this, I'm thinking, wait, this kind of just sounds like a union shop with extra steps. You're forced to join the union. Not to mention that this compliance documentation step makes things more complicated. I mean, seriously, reviewing every single form individually and deciding on whether you can hire them or not? You want to know what's even better? On SAG-AFTRA's own website, in their FAQ section about this, they have a question titled, "How long does it take to process a Taft-Hartley report?" Their answer is, "Due to the high volume of new media productions, please allow at least 6 to 8 weeks for principal Taft-Hartley reports to be processed." Please note, Taft-Hartley reports will not be processed until all final production paperwork has been submitted. This paperwork includes the cast clearance report, example, timesheets, performer contracts, and final cast list. What is this, man? Am I applying for a visa? Slowly but surely, you start to understand why Hoyoverse would not be interested in this. They're hiring studios with AI protections to find voice actors on their behalf. Why would you subject yourself to such bureaucracy? So if I tell you right now that more than 80% of voice acting gigs use a non-union contract, would you be really surprised? But technically, as a union member, you're not really allowed to work these non-union jobs. So what's the alternative? How do you avoid SAG-AFTRA's wrath? Well, you become something called FICOR. This means that you can work on non-union jobs even if a strike is ongoing. You still pay the dues every year to SAG-AFTRA, but you can't claim any of the benefits. As an added bonus, SAG-AFTRA actually calls you a scab if you're FICOR. Financial core members are viewed as scabs or anti-union by SAG-AFTRA members, directors, and writers, most of whom also belong to entertainment unions. By the way, this entire page about FICOR on SAG-AFTRA is literally just begging you not to do it, okay? It's like, please. Like, you are losing this is the worst decision of your life. And you know why? That's because once you turn FICOR, you're essentially exiling yourself from SAG-AFTRA. It is extremely hard to join again. The more people kept digging about how SAG-AFTRA works, how the Taft-Hartley works, and how complex all these terms are, the more they became disgusted with SAG-AFTRA and the strike and the voice actors acting entitled on Twitter. Coy understood this and tried his best to answer these questions that people were asking all over social media to the best of his ability. He does specify that a Taft-Hartley can be extended 3 times, up to 90 days. He then answers a question that says, but it sounds like the Taft-Hartley process can be exhausted and that actor will have to join eventually. To which Hoy confirms, correct. Under normal circumstances, after the 3rd 30-day period, the actor is required to join if they wish to continue working on union projects. However, with the ongoing strike, the SAG negotiating committee has publicly stated that they want to help non-union actors keep their jobs and eliminate whatever complications they can to that end. As such, they are able to negotiate a waiver for the must-join rule. This would be granted on a case-by-case basis, and the details of such a waiver would be determined in negotiations between the production and the SAG negotiating committee. The next question is, the production has to negotiate, so it's not a guarantee? I don't like that. To which Coy responds, bro, I promise they're not going to flip a coin to decide whether or not to grant the waiver. Negotiations are necessary, if only to make sure neither party is conditioning their commitment on some kind of loophole that undermines the other. And with the existential threat of AI, it is very much in the union's interest to grant these waivers wherever they can to get productions to agree to AI protections. So again, guys, this is all for AI. No matter what, this is all for AI protections. Even though it's only mentioned 12 times in the interim agreement, this is the true goal. One question says, I'm still not comfortable with this requirement to join. Sounds like a big organization bullying the little guy. To which Coy responds, I understand how this whole situation can give off that impression, and it's worsened by all the misinformation and anti-union propaganda out there. SAG-AFTRA is not a corporation. It is a non-profit labor union, albeit one comprised of very annoying theater kids, but a union nonetheless. Its sole purpose is to ensure the health and safety of actors and to protect them from exploitation, which, along with the health insurance plans and on-set emergency staff, are funded by membership dues. That's why there's a limit to the Taft-Hartley process. If there were no requirement to join, nobody would join, and those protections would become financially unsustainable. He ends this with a question that says, this is still a lot of maybes. Why should I believe you? You sound like a union shill. To which he replies with, my dude, I totally understand that none of this is close to perfect, and I am not a union fanatic by any means. There are multiple documented instances of me publicly calling out the union leadership, but if AI eliminates this job, then it won't matter how any voice actor feels about the union. Video game voice acting will be a thing of the past. I want to make sure this job still exists in 5 to 10 years for all aspiring voice actors to have a shot at chasing the dream. And the union is the only sufficiently powerful tool we have to that end. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but if making sure that non-union voice actors can still work is your main concern, you gotta bet on the entity trying to save this art from extinction, not the one with the incentive to replace all actors with AI. Again, I know it's not perfect, but we can't wait for the perfect solution when AI is at the doorstep and already replacing human voice actors. It is significantly easier for actors to fix the imperfections of a labor union, which is beholden to its members and relies on public support, than it is for any one of us to individually dictate the actions of a multi-billion-dollar company. In other words, he says, TLDR, I'm not a huge fan of the union, they are a means to an end. So no matter how weird or counterintuitive some of the contract might be, it's all justified because it's all about AI. And while I understand his viewpoint, it's not really the answer you're looking for when you're already doubting the entire strike and the union behind it. But Coy wasn't the only one trying to rally people back into joining this cause. Another Hoyoverse voice actor by the name of Kyle McCarley posted on the Genshin Impact subreddit a thread by the title, SAG-AFTRA members seeking to clear up some confusion. The only problem is that again, people were left with more questions than answers. It wasn't a very popular post. The top comment was wondering, why doesn't SAG-AFTRA just come out and make an official statement to clarify things and clear up confusion and misinformation for the general public instead of having voice actors as their mouthpieces and only wink wink nudge nudge at Hoyoverse on Twitter? This is a very good point. Why are voice actors having to do the union's job? Someone else pointed out the contradictory nature of this thread, where one of the bullet points said there is no requirement imposed by SAG-AFTRA for all performers hired on a union project to be union members. Such a requirement would in fact violate US labor law. But then goes on to say, once those 30 days have expired, they become must join. Honestly, at this point, not saying anything would have been better, because every time a voice actor tried to clear up misinformation, they only ended up confusing people even more. People were starting to conclude that this entire strike was nothing more than a Trojan horse. disguised as an AI protection for voice actors, but in reality only had voice acting monopoly and mafia practices. But we're not even talking about the real issue yet. The real issue is the fact that this strike's weird contradictory nature made people want to look more into SAG-AFTRA as an organization, and what people started finding out wasn't really pretty. Remember the strike in 2023 done by SAG-AFTRA? This was meant to give people working in Hollywood more livable wages and, more importantly, AI protections. Well, it turned out that many people were disappointed with these so-called protections. This article from Prism said this: critics of the deal who spoke to Prism were most concerned about the sections on generative AI, which is used to create synthetic performers or digitally created assets that are not any specific human performer but generated entirely through AI. This is uncharted territory. SAG-AFTRA member, actor, and director Satu Runa in Los Angeles believes the union should have stood against its use, period, rather than trying to work with it. It's very easy to replace us with this technology, she said. We shouldn't normalize it. The protections also include some significant loopholes. For one, for AI involving the participation of human actors, Schedule F performers who make more than $80,000 for a film are exempted, and consent is not required from actors if the photography or soundtrack remains substantially as scripted, performed, and/or recorded. Prior consent given can apply for future features if the producer includes a reasonably specific description of the intended use, language that could be interpreted broadly by producers. So if you make more than $80,000 on a film, those AI protections don't even apply to you, not unless specified, which is counterintuitive. Why did the strike even occur to begin with? And speaking of money, you know what's really interesting? Only 14% of SAG-AFTRA performers make more than $26,470 annually. Remember those wonderful benefits you get for signing up to SAG-AFTRA? One of them being health insurance? Yeah, you could only qualify for it if you make more than $27,540 a year. This means that over 86% of people who paid the $3,000 initiation fee and are part of SAG-AFTRA miss out on one of its most important benefits. Oh, and if you do actually end up getting the healthcare coverage, well, your information is just going to leak anyway, because on December 10th, 2024, SAG-AFTRA went through a data breach. And according to this article, personal information obtained in the breach includes names, social security numbers, and health insurance details. And the union, SAG-AFTRA, only notified these members almost 3 months after the incident. Isn't that wonderful? You pay $3,000 to join a union, right? You're finally making money as an actor. And now someone can steal your identity and you only are told about it 3 months later. But it's okay, because the chief of SAG-AFTRA is making over $1 million every year, guys. People weren't fooled anymore. They started siding with Hoyoverse the more they felt the taste of disgust. But just as you thought that things couldn't get worse, just as you thought that this taste of disgust in your mouth couldn't get more rancid, some voice actors, instead of logging off Twitter, decided to keep being dorks, making this way worse than it should have ever been. Kaylee Mills, the voice actor who had already tweeted some very interesting things, had this to say: SAG winning the strike means that their contracts will all have AI protections going forward. It doesn't make every game union. Also, I've worked on several union games with international talent. A game-going union does not bar that talent from working. Technically, no union actor should work non-union at all, but we do all the time. It's always been that way in voice acting. It's not necessarily fine, but it still is very different from taking an existing role from someone who vacated that role, withholding work for AI protections. That's why you don't see anyone calling out any of the actors announcing their new non-union roles. It's because while as much solidarity as possible helps the cause, no one really expects everyone to be perfect allies. Well, I mean, this begs the question, right? Okay, fine. We've already talked about AI protections. We've already seen how this strike is meant to make healthcare more affordable and raise rates or whatever, but like, is Hoyoverse really that bad of an employer? Are they underpaying these voice actors? Are they subjecting them to slave labor? Is this evil Chinese company exploiting our beloved voice actors and underpaying them? Is this why we really need a contract to be signed right now? No. According to Kaylee, even though the game is non-union, many of us are making the union rate. So what are we doing? Apparently not enough, because shortly afterwards, Kaylee deleted her Twitter account. Probably for the best, because God knows what else she would have said that would have hurt this strike even more. But it's okay, because this is like a tag team wrestling match. Kaylee's out, but guess who's in now? Corinna. The voice actor behind Paimon decided to post an unhinged rant on TikTok, and I could try to explain it. Probably won't succeed, so just watch, okay?
Okay, here's the thing. If voice actors, both non-union and union, in a video game want a game to go union, the game should go union. Nobody else's opinion matters. That's it. And YouTubers don't know anything. YouTubers don't know anything. They're not voice actors. They've never been in my industry. They don't know what my industry is about. They don't know anything about SAG. They don't know anything about being a non-union actor either. Stop telling me to go to liars. Liars. They are paid to lie to you. Also, I'm sorry. They have more incentive to lie. They have more of an incentive to lie because idiots like you fall for their shit and they get paid for that. Hello? God forbid. I want my industry to actually, like, I don't know, function and that everybody gets paid and everybody gets, like, healthcare. Did you know that, like, once things become union, people get paid a lot more? So people are like, oh, but, you know, then some non-union actors will have to join the union. Yeah, they'll be able to, easily, because they'll get paid more. Also, there are options that the union has to help pay for those things. There are options to help people pay for the union dues within SAG, but you don't know that. Oh my God, it's almost like you're not an actor. It's almost like you're not a voice actor. And neither are those YouTubers. But bottom line is that both non-union actors and union actors in a video game want it to go union and have wanted it to go union for a long time. So nobody else's opinion that is super fucking wrong anyway matters. Hope this helps.
Damn, I guess I'm... I guess I'm lying to you guys. You know, just don't listen to me because I'm a YouTuber, apparently. You should listen to Corinna instead, the voice and face of reason. But seriously, what was the goal here? Not only does it come off as unhinged, but it's also all over the place and says things that don't make any sense. Genshin was never a part of the strike. People are striking because they want Genshin to have a union contract. Why? Because it pays more. But they're already being paid the union rate. Then comes the topic of healthcare and benefits. But you know what's funny? As far as I know, and I could be wrong here, but I'm pretty sure Corinna is FICOR, not even a full-fledged member of SAG-AFTRA. You become FICOR purely because you want to work non-union jobs without getting into trouble. For that privilege, you're exchanging every benefit that comes with being a SAG-AFTRA member, including healthcare benefits. So I'm so confused, dude. Like, I just genuinely don't understand what the point of this rant was. And yet, Corinna was kind of becoming the unofficial spokesperson of voice actors regarding the SAG-AFTRA strike, which I'm sure you can understand is a disaster. The most ironic thing in all this is that Corinna makes this out to be a life or death situation, while continuing to work on Genshin Impact as the most important character for voice acting. You just can't make this up. And this just makes this whole rant even funnier. I mean, honestly, this is this even reached Chinese players, and they didn't really have a lot of nice things to say. Saying things like, please change Paimon's English voice actor, everyone will be happy. I'll even do another 6 months of battle passes if you want. I'll top up too if they do it. If I were an English dub enjoyer and have to listen to this rat scream any longer, I would actually quit the game. What a voice! It's like a desperate mouse that got pressed onto a grill by a piece of bread and slowly gets made into a sandwich. God damn, these Chinese players are ruthless. Oh, and just to add more fuel to the fire, Corinna said on Blue Sky that this TikTok was AI. It's not the original. Sure. Damn, AI sure got very advanced since the last time I checked. Interesting. Corinna then posted a video that featured a toilet. Corinna just sat there in front of the toilet, saying that all this harassment was overwhelming, that vomit can come out at any second, and then complained for 8 minutes about the strike. Yeah, this is actually real. This video is not AI. I think it's safe to say that if Hoyoverse find a new voice actor for Paimon, then it would kind of be justified just over this insane erratic behavior. Because when have you ever seen a voice actor crash this hard? The amount of damage that this strike had sustained in just the span of a few days was incalculable. Joe Zieja, the voice actor behind the Genshin character of Risley, decided to step up. He had already made a video when the video game strike had begun explaining why voice actors were striking, and now thought that he needed to make a new video explaining what's been going on with Hoyoverse while clearing any misinformation about the strike itself. Saying, I do my best to inject clarity into what has become a really sad cyclone of misinformation and toxicity, re the SAG-AFTRA strike, Genshin Impact, the recasts, and AI. Similar to my first video on the strike, it's an attempt to educate, not aggravate. But it ended up not really helping the situation as much as he was hoping, with this post quote tweeting it and saying, so they bullied the new Kinich voice actor for a strike that does not exist? Yeah. Let's look at the video real quick. So one of the first things he does is reiterate that the whole point of the strike is that SAG-AFTRA actors are not allowed to work with the struck video game companies. But as we saw earlier, Hoyoverse is not one of the struck video game companies. He then goes on to explain what's been happening with Genshin Impact and Hoyoverse games, and yeah, you'll find out soon enough why that tweet that we just saw was made. I'll put it on 1.5 speed. Watch.
Games that started production before the strike are also not struck. It's a very confusing atmosphere, I know, but I can relieve that confusion for Genshin fans specifically by saying this. Do you know what company isn't in that select group of production companies being struck? Hoyo. I cannot emphasize enough that MiHoYo properties are not and never have been union games. Therefore, Genshin has never been a struck property. There are 0 union rules governing Genshin or any MiHoYo game, period. End of story as of this date. This is not a debate. This means, and I want you to listen very carefully here, if the SAG-AFTRA strike ended tomorrow, this would mean absolutely nothing for Hoyo games and its actors. If suddenly WB and Formosa, Keywords, all the rest threw a ticker tape parade and said, we agree to all the actors' demands, yay! Nothing would change for Genshin or Star Rail or Triple Z or any other non-union game. So point number 1, please stop talking about Genshin like it has anything to do with the SAG-AFTRA strike. Genshin is not a union game. The actors working on it are not working under a union contract, period. Put a pin in that, okay? Because we're gonna come back to the idea of union and non-union actors in a minute, now that we've sort of covered union and non-union games. Okay, so why the hell aren't actors going in to record lines for Genshin if it's not struck? When the strike happened, many Genshin actors got together in various disparate channels and decided that now would be a good time to try to engage with Hoyo and encourage them to take some action. Actors could use the momentum, the social momentum of the SAG-AFTRA strike to include Hoyo properties in the conversation. Again though, it's not a strike and it has nothing to do with the union. Since this is not a strike, I'm not going to call it a strike. From here on, I'm going to call it a collective work refusal because it's not governed by any one body like SAG-AFTRA. There is no one result desired like a collective bargaining agreement, and there is no penalty for not participating, unlike the SAG-AFTRA strike. If you are a union member and you cross the line and record games you're not supposed to, you can be penalized. In a non-union environment, that doesn't exist. So, what did Genshin actors want? This is where some of the confusion kind of begins. The goal wasn't really totally clear. Some actors wanted them to sign a union agreement and flip union, become a union game. You might have heard this called an interim agreement, which just has to do with an agreement that's going on during a strike, or a full union contract. There's some nuance of difference here. Because Genshin's an ongoing game, they're essentially the same thing. Others wanted them to just add AI protections into their non-union contract. Something like the Nava rider, okay? Which is something that any actor can attach to any contract to legally protect themselves against AI exploitation. And some actors, understandably, didn't really know what to think about the whole thing, but they were motivated by the social side, solidarity, social obligation, community feeling, and they also refused to work. This is part of the problem of non-union games, or non-union anything, actually. Since there's no actual collective bargaining agreement governed by any union, it becomes difficult for a group of people to take a collective action. In social psychology, you call this a collective action problem. It's very complicated. So anytime a group of non-union actors tries to get together to achieve any result, it's hard. It's hard for us to communicate. It's hard for us to bargain. Since there are no rules in place, any actor is free to just disregard that collective effort at any time with no penalty, unlike, again, an actual strike where you can get fined or kicked out of the union for strike breaking.
So Joe confirmed one thing that we've looked at so far in this video. Genshin was never part of the strike, Hoyoverse games have never been part of the strike, and this is literally as if you were working in a corporation. Let's say you work at Amazon. You and your coworkers decided to stop showing up to work one day. You can't even agree on why you're striking, okay? Half of you want AI protections, the other half wants more money. What do you expect? What do you think that Amazon's gonna do? It's actually a miracle that they've been able to keep their jobs for so long while not showing up to work for months. As Joe said, this can't be even counted as a strike. And if anything, it sounds like a wildcat strike, something that's been prohibited under the Taft-Hartley Act. A wildcat strike is a strike action undertaken by unionized workers without union leadership's authorization, support, or approval. They're just hoping that by using the momentum of a different strike, they can somehow force Hoyoverse to sign their agreement. Do you realize how ridiculous this is? This is insane. I want to reiterate, if this was done in any other industry, you'd be fired within 24 hours, all right? And yet they're still doing it to this day. Then Joe talks about something that many people have been asking about. Okay, but what about the Taft-Hartley? What happens to non-union voice actors if Hoyoverse were to sign the interim agreement? Here's what he had to say.
If the actor does not live in a right-to-work state. Now we're getting murky. You might have heard the term Taft-Hartley thrown around, and I advise you really just don't look too deep into this because it's confusing. It's a piece of labor law that actually has nothing to do with SAG-AFTRA. It was written in 1947 and designed as a path to both protect people from being forced to join unions, but also offer them more flexible ways to join if they want to. For our purposes, bringing it back to us. Consider a Taft-Hartley like a temporary 60-day union pass to allow someone who is non-union to work on a union job. After that, they're considered a must join, at which point, like the status implies, they must join the union or stop working union jobs. I'll break here for a second and tell you that it is significantly more complicated than that. There are caveats as to when the Taft-Hartley triggers, for example. It's also possible to negotiate an individual waiver with the union and say, look, I'm only ever going to work this one union job. Please don't make me join. I won't do anything else. And they can say yes. There's flexibility here. These, however, are edge cases that are just beyond the scope of this video. This would be a 5-hour video. In the simplest sense, you can do on a Taft-Hartley a very limited amount of union work as a non-union member before you have to join. And that sort of makes perfect sense if you think about it. The union offers actual tangible benefits, even for a single contract. Reaping those benefits without being a union member and paying your dues is like extending your Netflix free trial indefinitely. At some point, you gotta pay for what you're using. But being able to join the union for some actors can be a really good thing. Getting into the union is a stepping stone in many actors' careers, and it can actually be difficult to qualify for the union because, bizarrely, the only way into the union is if you get Taft-Hartley first and then join. Oh, simple. No, it's not. I don't want to delve too far into union membership here, but it is important to understand and consider why an actor might not want to join the union. The entry fee itself can be steep depending on where you live. Mine was nearly $4,000 when I joined 10 years ago. So that talent would have to know for certain they were going to get at least 5 sessions out of Genshin to make up for that loss. That's about how much money you'd make in 5 union video game sessions, depending on the tier that you're in. Again, complicated. Or that actor would have to feel confident enough that they could book other union work to help them bring that number, that entry fee number, back to 0. You do get pension and health benefits, okay? But you only qualify for health benefits if you earn a certain income of union work, around $30,000 a year.
So this goes back to everything we said, of course. What was interesting, though, is that he had to pay $4,000 to join a union when SAG-AFTRA's website now says $3,000. Now, I will say that it is very refreshing watching Joe's video because while he does echo some of the same opinions as the other entitled voice actors, he presents them in a more realistic and conservative manner. But joining SAG-AFTRA specifically as a voice actor still doesn't really make a lot of sense. As a traditional actor, sure, you can make the case. But as a voice actor, 80% of your contracts are going to be non-union. Only 20% will be union and will contribute to your pension. Not to mention that the odds of you making enough to even qualify for health insurance are pretty damn low. Legal representation is really nice, sure, but it does feel weird to be locked behind SAG-AFTRA membership. If a non-union voice actor got their voice stolen, SAG-AFTRA could represent them, win the case, and set a precedent for every single voice actor on United States soil. That's what unions in Europe do, right? They stand up for everyone in the industry, not just people who are members. Asking for $3,000 from people who mostly do this as a hobby just doesn't make any sense. And that's a problem. Joe goes on to talk about what we already talked about as well, the fact that technically as a union member, working non-union contracts is not permitted. And he also talks about FICOR. He then goes on to talk about social media toxicity, how it doesn't help, and how, yes, this situation is quite complicated. We've understood that quite well. Unfortunately, Joe's intention didn't really work out as well as he had hoped, because many of the comments are left in utter confusion and were also disillusioned with the voice actors that have been participating in this discourse. I mean, look at this comment here with 4.6k likes, saying, so let me get this right. Union voice actors are bullying a non-union voice actor for getting work with a non-union game, which isn't being struck by the voice acting union. A non-union project that union voice actors shouldn't even be working on. So it's okay for union workers to steal non-union voice actors' work, but if a non-union voice actor takes the role of a union voice actor who shouldn't even be striking, but is refusing to work, there's hell to pay. This is ridiculous. And this comment says, in their quest to not be replaced by AI, they seem to have completely forgotten that actual people can still replace them. This strike, as well as many of the Genshin voice actors that participated in this discourse on Twitter, were now seen as a complete and utter joke. Kiba Walker, who had already participated in this discourse, said, is it just me or was that video, the video we just watched, not helpful to the situation and now people hate us more? The unintended consequence of this video stretched far and wide, with some people calling for every striking voice actor on Genshin Impact to get replaced immediately. People didn't care anymore. Yes, the video was 29 minutes long, but they could only focus on the part that said Genshin and Hoyoverse were never part of the strike to begin with. The voice actors who went completely unhinged on Twitter had lost all good faith. As this entire catastrophe was fully unfolding, Corinna decided to post a picture with some very well-known Hoyoverse voice actors, one of them being the voice actor of the main male character in Genshin Impact. This was after the unhinged rant and the sitting in front of a toilet complaining about vomiting rant. Look, this might have just been an innocent picture, but you have to understand, many of these voice actors had not really expressed anything on Twitter during this crisis, but they were still caught in the crossfire because being in a picture with Corinna after the insane unhinged rants meant that you approved of this behavior and meant that you thought the same way. Corinna is now essentially a walking plague. Any other voice actor that is seen in the same picture is probably going to get hated too. It's just not a good thing to associate with someone like that right now. Look, overall, you made it to the end. Congratulations. Overall, This whole strike, as well as the fundamental need for SAG-AFTRA as a union, is now being questioned. It's pretty insane to witness a strike that has been going on for 8 months get hurt so much from a public relations standpoint in just the span of a week because of some entitled voice actors. SAG-AFTRA is a joke of a union, especially for voice actors, and they deserve better. And while you may be disillusioned with all English dub voice actors right now, I do want to point out that look, most of them are actually very good people. I had the pleasure of speaking with one in particular, and he was one of the nicest people I had ever met. It just goes to show what a few bad apples can do to the reputation of an entire profession. It's something that will take a long time to recover. It's such a shame. In the end, though, many people are asking themselves, is Hoyoverse actually going to sign this agreement? After this, probably never. People are fully on their side now. Before, if they had recasted some voice actors, they would have probably faced backlash. Now, people are calling for the complete deletion of English dub in general. If they replace Corinna as well as any other entitled voice actor on Twitter, hell, even the one striking and that said nothing about this, then the backlash would be minimal. And that's just the impact of this entire controversy. I do hope that voice actors and performers of all kinds actually do get AI protections because it's actually a problem, but this is not the way to do it, especially when you're striking on something that isn't part of the struck companies to begin with. Thank you so much for watching until the end. I really appreciate it. This video took a long time to make, so I'd appreciate it if you like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff, and I'll see you in the next video, whenever that is. Love you so much. Mwah.